And good evening, everyone. Welcome to Bridge to the Galaxy.
Welcome. Good evening, wherever you are in the world. Maybe good day, like for Sylvain.
I'm Tanys Coughlan, and we have Calypso Castanares, and we have a special guest today, Sylvain.
Very special.
Sylvain, would you
Hello, everybody.
would you like to give people a little overview of who you are?
Sure. My name is Sylvain Rochon. My name indicates I am French Canadian, so that's where I was born. But right now I'm residing in Thailand, which is why it is morning here, pretty early, and the light on my face is all on my right side. So apologies for the shadowing, but that's what we get. I consider myself a paradise engineer. That's the moniker I've given myself. It's not a university title or anything special like that. And the reason for that kind of describes who I am. I enjoy creating a new future. So engineering a beautiful future, ergo the term engineering paradise. It's about intentional construction of something better for us all, right? But my background in a more formal ways, I have a bachelor's in biochemistry, one in chemical engineering, I have another one in education, and therefore I was an educator for most of my professional career, high school, college, university, and then consultation afterwards. And my passion has always been about transforming the world. And there's a lot in the world to be done. But one of my more recent passions has been grander than this world, has been more on the universal scale, or at least the galactic scale. It's like, what are we doing as a humanity? What are we doing here to be a better humanity, to be to improve ourselves, to emerge out of our cocoon, so to speak, into a butterfly that we should be. And that implies connecting with other civilizations that are out there watching, and perhaps even that have been around for thousands of years, curating humanity in certain ways and having different contacts. And we're already connected with these civilizations, just not in a formal way. So beyond my professional businesses, which are usually in IT and software, we've started the Alliance for Extraterrestrial Diplomatic Contact in 2020 for the purpose of creating a formal a diplomatic mission type of contact, formal with national leaders and ETs that are watching, waiting for us to be ready for a direct media ties, contact. And so the Alliance's purpose is to build an embassy for extraterrestrials. And we so far have garnered nearly 20 organizations and nearly 600,000 supporters of this particular project from all over the world. And we're still seeking other supporters, other organizations in all sorts of languages, so we can more effectively speak with government agencies, governments themselves, the United Nations, with the support of the people, basically. So, in a nutshell, that's who I am and what I'm doing right now.
Very exciting. It's just so exciting.
And this is part of why we're all here, actually, right?
Yes. We're all part of the Alliance, Tanys and myself. And this is our first show for Bridge to the Galaxy. And of course, we wanted Sylvain, who is the leader of the Alliance and a good and dear friend, and expand a little bit, if you can, Sylvain, on the aspect of the embassy and its connections with the United Nations and our mission.
Right. So this comes up a lot, and it's super important to understand. At the scale of the galaxy, let's just use the galaxy for a moment. We are a primitive civilization emerging from primitive thoughts, right? We're still warring with each other. We're still fighting with each other, but there is a definite sense of countries being organized in different groups. Like the EU is a good example. The African Union is a good example, and there's others. And there's also all sorts of trade organization. People are at the leadership level realizing that cooperation is far superior than aggressive means. So, and there's still some aggressivity, but we're moving in the right direction. But what's really important is that those that are watching us are way more advanced than we are. So it's a bit of a prime directive situation. If people are familiar with Star Trek and the Prime Directive, basically Star Trek is fictional, just so we are clear. I'm not saying they exist.
Or is it?
There may
Another show.
True.
There is a Galactic Federation.
Correct. But Star Trek itself is a fictional show, right?
It is. True.
So created by Gene Roddenberry. But the vision was, well, if there is an advanced civilization that meets a more primitive one, well, interference with high technology is a problem. Like, it can create disruptions if the landing civilization isn't ready. So the alliance is really all about the readiness of that primitive civilization. In this case, we are it, right? We are the ones. So how do we do that? Well, there's continuous societal changes, right, which happens from the grassroots level to all over to some of the leaderships that are thinking that way. But also there's through the formal agreed upon rules between different nations that have been already established. So that's where the UN comes in. Like this is a group that's been that was formed, I believe, in 1945. I know it's after the Second World War. It could be 45, 46, or 47. I don't remember. But and the nations agreed, okay, we can't fight with each other this way anymore. Like we need to have discussions in a certain way. So that's what was done by the national leaders at the time. So this is the forum where at that level of leadership, they have all these rules and discussions. Now, the Geneva Convention, which was, I believe, 1961 or 69, I get the dates confused, and were created to establish was to establish a set of rules about diplomatic contact between different nations, and how do you establish embassies, what does it mean, diplomatic immunity, and all this stuff. And all the nations of the world are abiding by their rules, and that's really important, right? That's really important because if we want to have contact from a civilization outside of Earth, like that's not inside our infrastructure and our way of thinking, we have to agree about how that's going to happen, right? So that's where the Vienna Convention comes in. It establishes if some group or some people are identified as diplomats, or if a building is identified as an embassy, then the rules apply. And therefore, if we build an ET embassy and we say, okay, aliens that come to this embassy or that visit us are ambassadors, automatically they are covered by those rules. Because right now, in most countries of the world, there are no laws that cover extraterrestrials. They were all designed for people, right? For people here, the way they're defined. Lawyers are sticklers for details. So our effort with the alliance is to build the embassy and to make sure that the Vienna Convention has the language that a bit more specific to accept a civilization that is not that doesn't have a nation here, right? And then automatically, then we can have an agreement between all nations about what happens when there is a formal contact, like an actual spaceship coming down or whatever form that it may be. So that's the whole idea behind it.
I had a question when you were talking. Has the United Nations ever thought about having an embassy for extraterrestrial contact before the Alliance proposed that or started to connect with the United Nations? Had they even had anything where they were thinking about doing it, or was it all brought about because of the Alliance?
Well, we're not the only organization that is thinking about an ET embassy. There have been embassies, like structures built in a lot of different nations, but in a non-formal way. Just
Yeah.
people, like an entrepreneur having some land and building something and having a landing pad and say, hey, here it is. But it's not something that's recognized by nations or by that nation or the United Nations, just a building. And it's a wish and it's a nice thought.
Mm-hmm.
But if we don't get all the nations on board, it doesn't apply to all the nations, doesn't apply as an actual embassy and so on. So it defeats the purpose that we were just talking about. We're trying to get all the leaders of us primitives to agree on a set of rules to avoid conflict between them. Right. And just building a structure in somebody's backyard doesn't solve that. The ETs don't need the building themselves to land and make contact. They've been making contact for thousands of years. They're waiting for us to put in the steps to agree that this is how we're going to do, and we want to have contact, and we want to welcome a positive contact at all level, especially those that have nukes available to them. It's like, okay, we won't fight each other. These are the rules. This is to have that discussion and understanding with the whites of their eyes. Like, okay, like if this happens, this is how we're going to behave, and getting the thumbs up with each one of them. And then the ETs can say, okay, look, now it's a much more safe arena for us to say hello, and they probably won't shoot at each other. For the privilege of like where they're landing or whatever, right? So that's really the work that we're doing. Like we were very fortunate that some organizations have been thinking about this for quite a long time. The International Aurelian Movement, which is one of the first members of the Alliance, they've been gathering funds since 1974. To build an embassy. So we have a financial resource and also a lot of work over the years, especially the last 10, 12 years from them to start the discussions and things like that. Now we have 19 organizations. Each one of them are putting in their grain of salt and effort and assets into the project. And we have a wonderful team of volunteers from all over as well. So to answer your question more directly, Calypso, I'm not aware of something like this being brought to the United Nations before we did, like formally. But there are other organizations that I know of, and they asked me not to talk about it. But you can look up too much. But you can look up Project Titan.
Okay.
And that is another effort in parallel to create that discussion at the UN. But these are firsts discussions. If they're successful, they have to be brought by a nation to the United Nations. It can't be just a group outside like us. It has to be like a diplomat or a leader of a nation bringing it to the United Nations and saying, okay, let's talk about this. That's how it works.
And that would be Daniel's job, isn't that what he's doing?
Well, I think he's in discussion, right, with some of the different countries.
Right, he's the president, right? He's one of the co-founders.
And we'll have him on hopefully after Sylvain, so everyone will get to meet Daniel.
Yeah, he's the one that has a discussion directly with the national leaders, and what he's doing is say, okay, this is what we have. We have $50 million US to build. We have blueprints. We have the support of nearly 100,000 people that want to get this done. And then he's talking with national leaders and saying, hey, bring this, and here's a package, and here's some money, right? Like for the whole project, it's all built. Bring this to the United Nations because we can't. You bring it to the United Nations. You'll be the superstar to bring this, right? And we are in discussion with nearly half a dozen different nations that seem to be willing. But we only have enough for one embassy in one country.
Yeah.
So whoever comes up first, putting up their hand and bringing it to the United Nations, they'll have our support and our resources that we've gathered for the last 40 years.
Yeah. So it's still a mystery who that country will be that will house the embassy. And this is very exciting times right now, because I don't know how long. How long do you think the discussions will be until maybe a country there's one country that's in the forefront?
Well, in some of these countries we've been talking to for 2 years. Okay, so it's not fresh discussions like from yesterday.
Yeah.
We don't know for sure because they control the timetable of all that stuff. But if you interview Dan, which I know you will, he's going to give you his guess because he's the one talking. He gets a sense of things. Governments don't move quickly, and they move according to their own political cycles, elections. I mean, all that. In my opinion, a lot of BS of how the systems work.
Say it, Sylvain. Say it. BS.
But that's the truth. That's the way it is. So they're kind of like manipulating the time, blah blah blah. And it works. But if you look up Project Titan, you'll see there is one government that is associated and identified, and they seem to be, and it's San Marino. Like it's not a secret. San Marino, most people don't know where that is. That is Italy? A country that is inside Italy.
Spain.
It's inside Italy. So it's actually a city-state that retained its independence even after
I had
Italy
no idea.
formed. A little bit like the Vatican is inside Italy.
Yeah, I was going to say like the Vatican.
Yeah, it's kind of the same thing, but it's not a religious state. It's just a city-state like Luxembourg or Venice. Mm-hmm. Although Venice is now not a city-state anymore, but it used to be its own thing. So they seem to be, from what I heard, they're the ones that may bring this to the United Nations. And that would be really cool if that happens. This is not our doing; it just happens to be a separate effort from elsewhere, which is fine. Like we needed discussions to happen at the UN and for it to be favorable.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so a big part of the alliance is us bringing organizations together for communication, right? That's there's many organizations working in little silos, and I think part of what the alliance is really excited about doing is making that a community of support, and bringing those different organizations together, and so that we can bring forth a bigger group towards this.
Yeah, it's a weight.
Yeah,
bringing some weight to it. Like when I talk about government, usually I'm not happy about it. About the governments, the way they're structured. They are typically antiquated. Speaking with members of governments, I have discussions with Canadian people are involved in Canadian politics, for instance, more directly, and even they agree that the system is still using principles and processes from the 19th century. Yeah. That's a while back.
Yeah.
And it's not a system that is using any elements of technology or principles of the 21st century. And we are in the 21st century. We have been for 23 years.
Mm-hmm.
But our system of government is still based on people representing a bunch of others, right? Yeah. Representation, which is a cool idea, and it's still a nice idea, but people can now represent themselves in the 21st century.
Mm-hmm.
Right, like we have technology to actually support that, and a lot of countries are not doing that. So we have to deal with the way things are right now.
Yeah.
And that means elected officials that represent a bunch of people, and they have their own self-interests in some cases, or they have pressures from systems where if they are not being selfish, they don't get elected, and therefore their voice is not heard. And the system is the way it is, right?
Yeah.
So right now we have to work within the system the way it is.
Yeah.
And hopefully there's other organizations that I am, working with other organizations to actually change system of government. We don't want, it's not about putting another leader in place. It's about us changing the system itself, making the system that is more modern.
Coming together, a round table to work out all these kinks.
Well, yeah, just we need a full governance review and transformation into the 21st century that wouldn't have these parameters that forces us to work this way, where we have to have a lot of support to get people to talk about it. Like, it doesn't matter if something can be super important. If there's not a lot of support for it, nothing gets done. Right?
Do you think there's a country in the world that operates in a good capacity?
Progressive way.
In a way that we would like most of the countries of the world to operate. Is there a single country or maybe a handful of countries that you think that are
I may be
controversial?
I may be controversial here in the answer. Yes. There are two different types of countries that could fit that bill. One is not controversial. There are countries, especially small countries, that are very advanced in how they work things, like Estonia, for example, and Iceland. Iceland is a representative democracy, but its whole party system and the way they generate laws is collaborative, not an opposition type of system. So each party, and typically, I think there's 4 major parties there. Which always come out. You have the liberals, conservatives, the Labor Party, and something about the environment. Like, these usually come up in most nations, like these themes. But when from my understanding at least, when they create a law, all 4 has to collaborate to create it. So they all have a say in how it works, versus having an opposition and the government, which is what typically happens in Canada and the US. And it's like, if the government has a majority, then the government does whatever they want for 4 years.
Like you don't get anything done.
And it's a confrontational type of system. So Estonia is digitizing basically everything and giving a lot of voice to their population, because they're using blockchain and they're decentralizing everything. So they've took a stance as a government to give a lot more power to the individual, making it much easier for the individual to actually participate in governance. So these are examples of democracies that are moving in a positive direction to actually be able to do more. So if the population has a wish, it emerges in lawmaking. These are pretty small countries, by the way, right? Both.
For sure.
But these are good examples.
I like what you said about collaborating, because that's where things happen, when people collaborate, and that's what the Alliance is doing. Collaborating, reaching out and collaborating with their supporters and reaching out to other people. And now our mission is to try to collaborate a little bit more in the social media circuit, and to see if we can make some headway there. How is that going, you think?
I think we're doing fine, but I want to complete my question. My question, because I had a controversial second answer to your question. Monarchies and authoritarianism, authoritarian countries can also make things move real quick, because you have, like, one person may decide, like, I like this.
They run with it.
And they run with it.
I'm not advocating for these types of governments, but just like even back in the day where all the countries had monarchies, if you had a really good ruler, things move really quickly and in the right direction. If you had a bad one, it was terrible for everybody. But I think
that's the danger of that kind of
that is the danger. Democracy, in fact, according to a lot of research and sociology, democracies mostly eliminated that probability, but also didn't engender awesome outcomes either. It kind of like gave us mediocrity. which avoids the bad stuff, but also you don't get great outcomes most of the time either.
Yeah.
And even then, you have a situation like in Germany in the early 30s, where you have a party that that emerges winning the democratic system, and ends up with a Second World War. That can also happen in the odd cases, but yeah, so we're not necessarily for the embassy itself. There's a country like the Kingdom of Bhutan, for example. That's a monarchy. I don't think they're going to be conquering the world anytime soon.
Prince Charles, speaking of monarchy, Prince Charles, he seems very open-minded in this. I would think, because he's done so much work, and his passion is to help our planet, and really, he collaborates with a lot of people, thinking outside of the box like yourself, and trying to make a better world and make it a more green world. He seems like somebody that wouldn't it be great if we could just get in touch with him? How many degrees are we away from Prince Charles? I mean, excuse me, King Charles.
Well,
they say 7 degrees of separation. So
yes, 7 degrees of separation is maximum, but I'm sure we probably can in our network probably less. But he's a functional monarch, but he doesn't make the laws anymore. But if he expresses himself, people listen, especially in Britain, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Listen.
He has a lot of leeway.
He's a big megaphone, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So there are some places, and in the world, and these are all countries I mentioned that are, as far as I know, including Bhutan, have representation at the UN. Yeah, if a monarch or authoritarian that has full control of their government decides to bring something at the UN, it brings up the discussion, and that's really the point. We have to have that discussion, that positive, a discussion about what are we doing if, and having a positive spin on it, versus the protective, security, national defense kind of discussion. That's we've had those. Every nation has had those.
Yeah,
it's not constructive. It's so we want to have that positive discussion, and I don't really care who brings the conversation. Let's have the conversation, right? At the UN level, and then bring it up, give it some air. And perhaps an embassy, since we have the funds and the plans, like let's, if the country is willing to give extraterritoriality to a piece of land, then you can actually build an embassy that will be recognized at the very least by that nation, because that's the process by the Vienna Convention, and therefore that nation gives protection to the ETs that would be there. And if that process and embassy is discussed also at the United Nations with all nations, then it becomes it can become very easily an agreement between nations. Yeah, okay, if something happens, this is an embassy that's been built in that nation, and we all recognize that as truth. And then if something happens, then the rules are already there. They exist on how to behave and what to do.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit more about the extraterritoriality of it? Because just so people have an understanding of what that actually means, because I think that's a key factor in this.
Yeah, it is. These are things that are described in the Vienna Convention. So if people want to get the nitty-gritty, can go and get that document and read the boring legalese of it. It's all in there. But in a nutshell, what it is, it's and you've seen these as movies in actual like country-to-country embassies, right? You're in, I don't know, you're in Lebanon, for example, and you're an American. Let's say you forgot your passport, or you left it somewhere. Well, you're going to go to the American embassy in Lebanon, right? When you enter the embassy, well, you have these American soldiers there, or guards, and it's a building, and there's the American flag flying there. Well, that's because that land belongs to the U.S.
Yeah,
it's U.S. soil, right? And you've seen this in movies. So the person, goes from Lebanese soil, crosses that gate, and they're on American soil, American rules apply within that boundary. So that's extraterritoriality. It means it's a territory that is outside of the nation state, but that is within our nation. So that's why it's given. In this case, that was a territory that was given by the country of Lebanon to the U.S. to establish an embassy, to have these engagements and diplomatic missions, and to facilitate conversation with its citizens within their country, and so on. So in our case, it's a bit different. It's a little different. You still have extraterritoriality, but then, you know, the UN or the nation would have to define, well, to whom is that land given to? Because we don't know which civilization and how they function. Like we know they function at a different level, maybe a different society structure, all that stuff. But they have to kind of say, okay, whoever, and this is an ET civilization's land now, because that would be how extraterritoriality would work. And therefore, if you cross into that land from, let's say, Mexico, into that extraterritorial land, you're in ET land, essentially, or whatever that is defined. Like, we don't have a name for it because we structure our stuff in our own way. They structure their, land or cultures in a very different way that we're not really sure about. But we established whatever the language they would be. It's like, well, this is ET land, let's say, right? And the building that we build there is also going to belong to them. Ultimately, it's inside their land. It's their embassy. And then we visit somebody else's house when we cross over through those gates. That's the principle. Once we have a more open contact, and arguably, some of you may know, like there may have been a lot of contacts between ETs and governments throughout the years as well. There may already have been some of those discussions with some of the nations we're talking to. We don't know, because they would keep those things very quiet and secret. But they may know more. They may be able to kind of put a name to that when they give it. I don't know how that's going to work out. But the principle and the function of it is like this. And there's protection in the airspace above it, according to the Vienna Convention. The diplomats that visit have inherent diplomatic immunity. You've heard that term before from movies and other things. So nobody can touch them. And we don't need to transform any national laws to apply protection for the ambassadors. All they need is the label ambassador. And then all the nations have to abide by the rules of diplomatic immunity. It doesn't matter if they're non-human. Right? So that's part of the bypassing some of the hurdles of law of the earth with dealing with ETs.
What are your thoughts on some of the disclosure that's been happening in the last couple of years?
I think it's been exciting. The last couple of years have been revealing for a lot of people. We've had a lot of people kind of awakening to the concept of making contact and in a positive light. And I think the grassroots desire to have this kind of discussion, to have contact, has forced governments to disclose. Because they've been advocates for disclosure like for 50 years, but they haven't gotten anywhere. But more recently, government has been more flexible with it. And it's not a mystery. It's not because all of a sudden, they have goodwill. It's because there's more and more pressure to actually from the population who are voters.
Definitely.
Right, to show us like what's going on here. Like
they can't hide it anymore. There's just everyone's got a cell phone, and there's just been so many cases and documents and all kinds of things going on for, like you said, years. They can't hide it anymore. They has to be brought out, and it's at a snail's pace, unfortunately, but I think we are getting somewhere. I think the next couple of years are going to be pretty exciting in that arena. What do you think?
Well, I think we're reaching a tipping point. If you're familiar with that concept, it's kind of building up, and that's the last couple of years have been accelerating. And every year, the percentage of general population that believes that aliens exist in the first place, that's well over the 60% mark, like around the world. People that believe that there are ETs somewhere, like just galactic. I can tell you that probably very close to 100% of scientists would say, yeah, that definitely there's life elsewhere. It's just a rational thing to think about.
Yeah.
The other step is like, are they here? Have they been visiting? Well, the percentage is less, but it's still nearly 50%.
Yeah.
And every year that's increasing. People are believing, like they've been here either today, the last few years, or the last few thousand years. People are starting to get warm to the idea. And what's exciting to me is not only that. What is exciting to me is when you ask a person, okay, are you like, what do you think about whether like if a spaceship comes down, what happens? Like, what do you think about that event? And most people now, I'd say over 50% of people are either curious or have a positive thought about it. They think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
And that's exciting because we could revert to protectionism, right? And say, oh, we have like, they're out there, they're watching us, and therefore we have to like put a shield over the earth and guns and all that stuff. Like we could revert to that instinct, but it doesn't seem to go that way. It seems to be more like, tell us more about, hence the disclosure, like what do we know? And let's put some researchers out there. Like NASA just unfolded a budget, for example, to explore UFOs. It's not a big budget, but it's a budget, right? There's more efforts surrounding SETI nowadays about contact. There's the Galileo project, which is a set of scientists led by Dr. Avi Loeb, for example. They want to research these objects and try to determine the materials, where did they come from, how did they move, and these are all positive efforts that demonstrate that we are way more curious than fearful. And that's great. Curiosity is amazing. Like that's positive. Yeah. And then there's people like us that are like, yeah, we don't care about how they're built and all that stuff. We just want to meet them. Like we just just like bring in, like, let's have an open conversation. Let them tell us, like, show us their craft or whatever. Like, just they can tell us who they are, their culture, how they think. Who are we to them?
Yeah,
which to me is a way bigger question. Yeah, why are they here watching us so much? What's the deal here?
Well, you touched on something there. One of the most exciting things that I find that has really expanded people's curiosity, that's being spread mainly through social media, YouTube channels, and things like that, are all of the historical evidence that have been uncovered from like the Sumerian tablets, and how all of these ancient writings and discoveries are correlating kind of like the same narrative, just different wording or whatever, that there have been ones from the stars that, like, for instance, in the Sumerian tablets, the Anunnaki, I think the Anunnaki is not a race. They're not talking about a race. They're just labeling them. The ones from the stars, I think that's what Anunnaki means. It came down here on a mission to save their planet, and they were mining for gold, and they were working with the humans. And there's been, a lot of these writings are starting to come, they're being talked about all over. And it seems like a lot of people are very, knowledgeable these days when you talk about the Anunnaki or their, things like that, the Sumerian tablets, Egypt, and all of that stuff, and how these narratives have a similarity, that there are ones from the stars that have been here and they've been mingling with us. And we're waiting for this giant reunion of sorts.
Yeah. I'm a huge fan of history, and ancient history in particular. I've always been. And it was always amazing to me, and even when I was a teenager, about the similarities of stories in different disparate parts of the world back in the day where these different parts of the world did not connect with each other at all. Because
They
we're
didn't have
talking
the
about
technology
thousands
then.
of years.
Yeah.
Oh, no, yeah. Thousands of years ago. I mean, most people, 99.5% of people never left their villages, right? Like, let alone left the country to across an ocean. I mean, there were a very small percentage of people back then based on archaeological finds. Yet, these stories about people from the sky coming down, creating life often, sometimes having children with humans, interacting in a very human way and with human-like emotions. You know, you look at the Greek and the Roman and the Egyptian gods, like they had their own conflicts. These are very human-like behaviors. You have these stories all over the place. And you're right, like the names that humans gave them in scriptures, Anunnaki, Elohim, right? And this is the Jewish. They mean those who came from the sky.
Yeah.
People who came from the sky. The Native Americans across the Americas, like from north to south, like you can go throughout, they have stories that even to this day are part of their legends, where they had interactions with people that came from the sky, that created them, they interacted with them, same kind of stories. And a small detail that is basically universal is that you often have a character or characters in those stories that have green or blue skin. Right.
Yeah.
Even noticed this here in Thailand, because I recently moved to Thailand, went to a Buddhist temple, an amazing temple in Bangkok. And it was this massive mural. And I know nothing about, you know, the ancient history of Thailand and their stories. I've known about Amaterasu, who is the goddess, creator of the people of Japan. She was reputed to have green skin. Right. Right. In India, I'm not sure which one, but there's a god or two that happen to be green. I'm pretty sure it's not Brahma, but I think some others that have green skin.
Yeah, Shiva has blue. Yeah.
The Shiva, okay,
Yeah.
yeah, or blue or green skin. In Egypt, Osiris, the creator, green skin also. And so on. So you see some of those little details where the green or the blue kind of comes up, and the person that happens to be that happens to be a creator of some kind. Well, why is this? And they usually are taller or shorter. Like, you know, they're not human. They're identified as different, looking like them, but also different.
Yeah.
In some ways, and they can go to the sky and kind of come back. This is like throughout history, like they're found in cultures where they would write certain things on occasion that never had any contact with each other, and yet the stories are basically the same from their old history. I think those cannot be ignored, because you can't explain them away as, well, it's mass storytelling, or you know, there has to be you know, it's word of mouth that was eventually written down.
Yeah.
But there's some truth to that, to some of those imagery, and sometimes you can even identify in scriptures or sculptures, or things that look very mechanical. Yeah, hieroglyphs look mechanical, look like spaceships, that look like they're human depictions of such.
Yeah.
Right. But they are clearly, they're describing what they've seen, and they look like mechanical.
Yeah, it's even in
machines.
the Bible. Yeah, Ezekiel.
Yeah, Ezekiel describing like wheels flying, and then kind of describing, and somebody actually in the States took that script and built something as if it would, what if it's a machine? Let's build it by Ezekiel's description. And it ended up being like something like that looked a bit like a flying saucer.
Yeah.
Right.
There's even pictures I've seen, like in Renaissance paintings, where you have the Virgin Mary, or and then in the very background there seems to be like a UFO looking shape with a man in it. I don't know if it was, man in it, you know, done, you know, I don't know what's that word I'm looking for, with subliminal, like a subliminal kind of painting.
Yeah.
But even back then, you know, you see these little things. It's like, what is that?
You can see something. We mentioned Sumeria earlier. There's been some very interesting. I'm not sure it's not the only place where you saw this. Is like sculptures from 5,000 years ago, where it's a depiction that looks very much like how we depict DNA, like
Oh,
a
yeah.
double helix strand, and according to their history, that was a symbol of health. And we still have that symbol nowadays, even before we knew what DNA
Yeah,
was.
it's in our
The
medical
snake.
sign. I forget.
Caduceus.
Yeah.
The caduceus.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. And where does that come from? Is that, and yeah, you can dismiss those as coincidences, artistic renditions. But if it's everywhere in the world, or all sorts of cultures, it kind of raises the questions like just how far back did we have contact with a more advanced civilization? And where do these stories come from?
Yeah.
And then you can talk about the buildings, the different pyramids all over the place, where they're located, and so on and so forth. And we can talk about these things forever. And even I spoke with I used to work with a person that happened to be born in Nazca, Peru.
Oh.
You've heard about the Nazca lines, maybe? Right?
I think so. Yeah. There's a lot of activity in Peru, a lot of stories and things.
That's true, but Nazca, it was a very interesting conversation. I happened to be his boss at the time, so he was a bit careful when I asked him questions because, like, I was very curious. It's like I heard he was from Nazca. I was like, wait a minute, I know that city because of the Nazca lines. You can only really see them from the air. They're like glyphs that show like a spider. And
oh
things like
yeah, yeah.
Hundreds of meters in diameter. From the ground, they look like just fences with a few stones, and they don't look like much, but from the air it's like,
yeah, you can totally see it. Yeah.
So I was asking him, okay, well, you're from there, what's up with the Nazca lines? Like I had to ask.
Yeah.
And he was extremely Catholic, like his philosophy, just like most of South America, he's very Catholic, but he's from there, right? And he says, oh, the Nazca lines is about like these were put in place by my ancestors because they had interactions with peoples from the start.
Wow.
He's like,
said it like
what? Straight up, just said it like that.
It's been in his tradition, so it's like
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's a story from my family. Like that's what they are. I just like said it straight up, like that's that it's been passed down as information from generation to generation, and that's what they are. It's like, oh, okay, cool, all right. And I asked him like, how do you reconcile that and Christianity? Because that's another follow-up question.
Yeah.
Like how does that work, right?
Yeah.
And it says, well, it's like his answer was, well, these aliens, they were created by a more advanced civilization. Sorry, they were created by God. No, not by more so. They were created by God.
Yeah.
So he brought that, and that's a common explanation from monotheistic. They say, well, yeah, aliens do exist, and the Vatican would say they are. I mean,
yes.
They agree. And they say, well,
Pope
God
Francis
created the whole universe, and therefore the aliens are also God's creation, and so that makes sense to say that. But it was a very interesting conversation that kind of reinforces the point that we've had contacts with one or perhaps more civilizations.
Yeah.
And
for centuries,
millennia.
Right? Yeah.
Millennia. And those who say that, well, they must, some of them may be aggressive and want to do something with us. Well, they haven't been doing a whole lot with us in aggressive forms for thousands of years.
They've had when we were at our most primitive, they didn't do anything. And,
so why would we assume that they are unpeaceful? Why would we assume they're not peaceful if they've had the opportunity?
I suspect, like, if you look at the individuals within every society, there's going to be jerks.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm sure they have their own share of dicks and jerks. So, like, if there's some stories from way back where there were like people that acted badly against humans, sure. I'm sure there have been some. But as organizations or civilizations, the general, just looking at history, has been more curating, being careful, guiding, trying not to be involved too much and kind of letting us stumble on our own. And that's what it looks like from a historical point of view. Now we're coming to a point where we know enough and we've evolved enough as societies where at least our perception is that we're close to be ready, right? And then if we can just, go beyond that little hump that we seem to be stumbling on, to say, okay, let's agree that we want to be welcoming. We're ready. We understand with each other how that's going to go, so we won't fight each other. Then we'll have, like, I don't know what it's going to look like a bunch of lights in the sky coming up. It's like, okay, like, now we're here. You guys are ready. You got your rules. Like, let's get this done. They're going to decide on that when we're ready. Just like the Enterprise with Star Trek first, that they decide, okay, now it looks like they're ready. Let's go and make contact. Yeah, and there's still turbulence when that happens anyway.
Yeah.
Well, and I think, we have a lot of work to do in terms of stop fighting each other in order to show that we can be peaceful, right? So I think that's another aspect of the Alliance is, we're all in it for, let's bring world peace, bring love. That's another whole aspect of what needs to happen for us to have that understanding with them, right?
I think it's probably, in many ways, the most important aspect, even though it's not the mandate. The mandate is about the embassy, but that's the whole, like, everything that I already described, that's to get things moving and to get people organized. So that we're working on that. But underneath this, most of the organizations that are currently allied with the Alliance and in the network, they're working on grassroots love, right? So let's just be better with each other. Right. Be more loving, cooperative, sharing. Let's be one, because we are. That's the truth. We are one. We are one, not only on planet Earth. We're not just Earthlings, even though that's a definition, that's a description. We are one with the universe. We are one with the ETs. I've heard the comment again recently, like, we are ETs ourselves. You can think about it that way, or you can also think, well, they are all human, right? Like, it's just a variation of consciousness, having different forms. Like, what's the difference between us having different skin colors and having, I don't know, an ET that looks like a spider, for example,
or a praying mantis,
or praying mantis, or a lizard. Like, I know that there's a lot of people that think lizard-looking aliens may be bad. I don't know, but is it inherently a bad evil if you look like a lizard? No. So it's just we have trouble with our own little differences in humanity, and they are probably very, very different from us in a lot of cases. We have to be ready for those differences. And it's not only their look.
That's right.
That from experiences that people had, people that have had abductions, actual documentation. Betty and Barney Hill would be one of the first, ones to pave that way. And they say that, when they've encountered ETs, just the fact that they had telepathic capability made it feel like an intrusion on our consciousness, our being, our energy. And so that kind of put us into fight or flight a little bit, like, this. And so we have to understand that we are dealing with a species, no matter what type of species it is, that's going to be very different from our own. And we have to get out of fear. And like you said, be more open and creating for ourselves a reality, a loving reality and collaborative reality, to get us into a reality for ourselves that is more open to connection with these, extraterrestrials, creating the reality we want for ourselves. If we're focused on fear and you know, that fight or flight and paranoia and, you know, maybe falling into some of the belief systems that have been portrayed in Hollywood that they're going to come and invade us or whatever, then we could very well, you know, create a reality for ourselves, you know, that we don't prefer. So if we stay focused on love and collaboration and doing what we're doing with the Alliance and, you know, coming together with people all over the world to have open conversations and, you know, it can turn into something fantastic. And it already is. I mean, you know, look at us here, that this has been pretty fantastic. Our coming together, you know, as friends and expanding and, you know, I'm just very excited for the future. I'm so glad that you're here and also being our leader with the Alliance and helping us create this Bridge to the Galaxy show as well. And you're just awesome, Sylvain. You're awesome. And we're so happy to be part of this amazing future.
It's a journey for us all.
Everybody
that's watching this, interacting with this this video, we can all do our part to be ready. Because ultimately, the most fundamental thing we can do to be ready for you know, a galactic encounter or joining the galactic community is to be happy ourselves. If you're happy, you don't fall into the traps of negativity because you just and you think positive, and you help others be happy themselves by just being yourself. So that's the most fundamental piece that if I can share in closing, you know, just be happy, make other people happy, love, accept, share. You know, build a new world by your being.
Yeah.
And there are organizations that are getting things done through, you know, by bringing people together to like the Alliance and others, and that's great. If you want to volunteer with the Alliance or other organizations that are within the Alliance, you know, offer yourself. That's a lot of love as well.
For sure. Reach
but
out
you don't
to
need
us.
to do that to make a big impact.
Exactly.
The bridge is within us. Like we build that bridge, and we also build the embassy within us, right? To be ready and helping others being ready is really an act of love and happiness. So
and that's what everybody wants. Everybody wants that. That's our commonality right there.
3 C's. 3 C's: compassion, collaboration, and caring.
Yes. Love it.
There you go.
That's a fine recipe.
It is. It is.
That makes a fine pie.
It does. Me, oh my. Oh no.
Uh-oh, here we go.
That's amazing. Well, thanks to both of you for setting this up, the Bridge to the Galaxy. I know there's going to be more shows, more people that are going to come to share. And I've seen a lot of comments also through social media that were very supportive.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And you can see our website down below.
Yes, the Alliance for ET.org. Check it out, everybody. You're going to find it amazing. We got some great graphics and videos and information there. And like Tanys said, and Sylvain, you know, reach out. You don't have to, but if you're curious, you have questions, you want to know more, just reach out to us, ask us.
Yep. Well, you're welcome. Everybody's welcome.
Yes, everybody.
Exactly.
And yes. Thank you so much, Sylvain. This has been fantastic. Sending you a big hug. Have a glorious day. It's
thank you so much.
It's Tuesday where you are, and I can hear chickens in the background.
It's Thailand countryside, so chickens and roosters waking up, waking everybody up.
Send me and Tanys, or if you want, send us some pictures of where you're at and everything. I would love to see.
Yeah. All right.
And we lost Sylvain.
And he's frozen.
And he's frozen. He's not freezing anymore because he's not in Canada anymore.
Exactly.
He's in Thailand.
I'm freezing.
Oh my goodness. Well, I just want to say thank you, Tanys, because you have been so instrumental in putting this together, all the graphics, everything, getting us together, having the meetings and everything. So I'm sending you a big hug, a nice, warm and toasty California hug.
Perfect.
Up to you in Canada. And I love you so much. And thanks to everybody that has been watching us. Anybody watching the replay, #replay, and let us know where you are in the world and your thoughts on everything. And I'll say good night to you, my dear Tanys, and to everybody watching. Goodbye and good night, and lots of love.
Sending lots of love, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.